We're going to start dealing with dance by looking at forms, and we're going to be focusing on 5 common forms of dance. We're going to be dealing with ballet, modern, world ritual, folk, and jazz. We're going to start with ballet. Now, ballet is comprised of classical or formal dance forms resting on a set of prescribed movements and actions, and tends to be highly theatrical. Basically, ballet is taking regular human gestures, nonverbal communication that we see every day, and reducing it to its bare essentials to heighten and develop those forms into a meaningful form of movement. So we see a fluid succession of movement or images within a code of movement, basically meaning that we see the dancer, and as they move from position to position, we can read both the positions that they hold as well as the transitions between those positions. At its base level, ballet expresses basic human experience and desires. So it's basically trying to get across the human condition. Then we have modern dance. Now, modern dance started as the antithesis to ballet. They started as a dancing rebellion, and I'd love to see a dancing rebellion. It would be like something out of Glee. But leaving that aside, it was a dancing rebellion against the formality of ballet because they saw ballet as incapable of communicating in modern society. So instead, they're going to explore the nature of natural and spontaneous movement. In an attempt to be non-ballet, modern dance has actually developed a series of forms and conventions, which sounds exactly like the forms and conventions that ballet is based on. We'll leave that aside for now. What sets it apart, though, is modern dance seeks to make the floor more interactive with the dancer. The dancer is not trying to gracefully avoid the floor or appear to be floating, but rather accepts the laws of gravity, and we see that in those performances. Then we have world concert or ritual dance, which is basically non-Western dance, non-Western, non-theatrical dance as a rule for this class, and is an overarching, undefinable term for basically everything else that we're not really covering. It could be ritualistic dance, it could be entertainment. Some of these serve a purpose to spread information from generation to generation, passing history, culture, social taboos, and mores between the generations. It's not always something that's written in a book. Your textbook actually goes on for paragraphs basically saying this is everything that we aren't going to study. So this is basically non-theatrical ritual dance from non-Western cultures. Then we have folk dance, which is a body or group of dances performed to traditional music. These are dances that everyone knows and everyone understands. Generally, we don't know the original artist. For example, we don't know who wrote the Hokey Pokey. And I wish I did, because that song haunts me to this day, ever since that day in moving aside. And these folk dances will incorporate prescribed movements and rhythms that have been passed down through various generations. At some point, these dances have been formalized. And for these dances, we're looking at the Hokey Pokey, the chicken dance, the square dancing, which many of you probably did in high school, the electric slide, which I don't know why that even exists. Any of these dances where rather than watching, we participate, and most people would know the moves for them. The act is done to involve participants rather than done for an audience. So this is any dance where the expectation is not that you're watching, but rather that you're participating. And it develops an individual sense of participation in society. That's really why it exists. It is to create a sense of social identity, not identifying as the individual, but identifying as a group which unfortunately is stuck doing the hokey pokey. But either way, you're part of a group. Then we have jazz dance, which could be defined as any dance with jazz hands. But jazz dance has its origins in Africa before slaves were brought to America. The slaves used dance and song to pass on their culture, much as we saw in world concert ritual dance. This was taken up through the filter of the white community as they passed these blackface minstrel shows through the countryside. That will come back into this tradition of jazz dance. So since then, it has become a style of movement lacking a precise definition. It's seen as a vital and theatrical dance, rooted in jazz and African heritage. And this is where we see improvisation, syncopation, ideas that we don't see in other forms of dance. You couldn't imagine a ballet where suddenly you have improvisation, or where you have a really strong sense of percussion, for example. Jazz dance is really a form that is still developing to this day, so it's very difficult to define. And in fact, if you were to go to a number of jazz dance shows, you could see a wide variety of dance forms that you might identify as primarily modern dance or primarily ballet, but they don't quite fit those definitions. So it's something really exciting in the dance world because it's a form that is still developing, that hasn't developed those specific poses and forms and conventions that we see in other forms of dance.